Welcome back. Now Damien Delaney is on the line. Evening.
Joe, how are we keeping?
Yeah, very well. Look, I think truth being truth, if your ears were burning, I was bemoaning your decision just before the ad break to pick Galway ahead of Stephen Cluxton. I feel I should say that to your face.
I had to, man. I wouldn't be able to show my face down in Cork again if I didn't.
Why? Because of anti-Dublin stuff?
Well, Cork GA is in a bad place at the minute, you know. I can't be. You've had enough success anyway, so leave the begrudging Cork fellas alone.
Okay, well, you begrudge away. I'm not a dub, by the way. Let's put that in the record as well.
Go on, so why does that upset you so?
Well, Cluxton's moment for me, if you were to say Dublin over the last decade, that is the iconic moment. That is beating Kerry to win a first All-Ireland in however long, the pressure on him, the build-up to it as he runs up to take the kick, what it meant for Dublin GAA, what it propelled them into doing, versus Galway winning a one-off All-Ireland with a very likeable and brilliant team. But in 20 years, put it this way, in 20 years, everybody will still remember Cluxton's moment and it will still be talked about. And I feel that will be less the case with Galway winning a hurling All-Ireland.
I think that with the resources that Galway had available to them, the proximity to the capital, the fact that Dublin get to play all the games at Croke Park, they always have the hill, it's not iconic for me. I'm sorry. Shane Lowry beating all the odds, the weather, the field, everything about Galway is just so much better, to be honest with you. That's how I genuinely feel.
But it was when Cluxton kicked it. I mean, they hadn't won 10 in a row at that stage. This was actually, can you imagine the psychological barrier that was there for Dublin, the pressure on him in that moment?
Yeah, I mean, look, I respect people like Chris Froome as well, but when they have the biggest, they have a big budget, they're backed by AIG, they get the capital, it's all stacked in their favour. That's just how I feel about it. So it's not iconic. It's a fantastic moment, but it's not iconic.
Wow.
I know all the Dublin fans there know
we're going to have to really agree to disagree here. So, Carlo Ancelotti or Mikel Arteta, who would strike you as the better manager here if that's how business transpires?
Oh man, they're both not kind of jobs you'd be jumping at, to be honest with you. And Mikel Arteta, I know he's been at Arsenal. Maybe he has a better understanding of the club, but they're not ideal scenarios for either. There's a lot of pitfalls for both of them. If Arteta does go to Arsenal, at least he's been at the club, so he has some idea of what they're about. Ancelotti going into Everton, I mean, it's not a fantastic squad. You got an owner, you got Bill Kenwright somehow still involved there. You got Marcel Brands, I think his name is, still in there as well. It's just not an ideal situation for anyone. Now, I know Everton have money and they have the potential to spend money, but look, it's a bit of a pitfall for both of them. But I wish both of them luck if they do end up taking those jobs.
The interesting thing about Ancelotti over the last couple of years is that he has firmly established his reputation as a facilitator, as a manager of big players and big egos. And we saw the job he did at Chelsea. That's not Everton, quite clearly.
No, but perhaps it's the lure of the Premier League. And perhaps after meeting the owner, who has money, by all accounts, has spent money, has probably promised to spend money again. As we've seen with Napoli in the Champions League this season, he can definitely set up a team to defend, and I think that's obviously Everton's biggest problem this year is they ship an awful lot of goals. So he's going to go in there, stop the rot, so to speak, although I know Duncan Ferguson has gone a long way to doing that as well. But he's going to set them up strong defensively, and hopefully if he can get a couple of players in January, Everton will definitely pull away from that relegation zone.
The Duncan Ferguson tenure has been interesting. It's only been 2 games, but he's made an impact, that's for sure. And on the pitch yesterday, in his shirt, being interviewed by Jeff Shreves live on TV. I must say, before the Ancelotti news really firmed up this afternoon, I was looking at Duncan Ferguson thinking, he's saying he doesn't want the job, but he is absolutely behaving like a man who wants to be front and centre. I wasn't so sure of the dynamics.
Yeah, I think it's hard for him to go there and say he wants a job when in his heart of hearts he knows he's not going to get it. I think Duncan Ferguson is a very emotional guy, and he's brought a lot of emotion, a lot of charisma to the job. I think it's probably something that Everton fans want to see, because supporters want to see a manager that genuinely feels the club. And I think he's given them that. But in the long run, when you look at the decision he made on Saturday about Moise Kean, bringing him on and taking him off, I mean, they're not the traits of an experienced manager. If you're bringing a player on, and I know, listen, fans from the outside will say, oh, well, if he wasn't doing his job. But if you look at what Moise Kean's performance on merit of what it was, he didn't deserve to be taken off. I mean, he wasn't fantastic. But if that's where Duncan Ferguson is setting the bar, well, then he's going to run out of substitutions in the first 20 minutes of every game. So from that point of view, which means he's still an emotional guy, and I would say safely that substitution was a lot more than just his performance. You know, I'd say Duncan Ferguson genuinely dislikes the guy. I've heard or read things that he's regularly late for training, doesn't train very well. He probably epitomises everything about modern football. A young kid at Juventus, sees a big money move, probably isn't the best of professionals, and he's probably kind of anti-football really, or kind of the anti-Duncan Ferguson. So, but you can't go down that road with him. If he doesn't like him, then he shouldn't have brought him on. If he didn't think he was going to get a performance out of him, then he shouldn't have brought him on. He should have just left him on the bench and brought somebody else on. So they're not the traits of a manager, an experienced manager that's managing off logic and not emotion. You know, that emotion will only get you so far.
Because the mood music around Moise Kean isn't good generally. Like just a couple of weeks ago, his father was talking about the transfer. He said, sending my son to England was a mistake. He's still so young. He's not feeling good at Everton. I don't like this transfer. I hope he can go back to Italy as soon as possible. I hope he goes to Rome. But the important thing is he comes back here. So clearly it's not working out. Even behind the scenes, it's not working out there at all. The mistake really seems to be putting him on in the first place. Like I would presume Ferguson would have a feel for Moise Kean's temperament, what he can offer, where he is in his career. He would have other options. Should you, when you put him on and you think to yourself, oh, I've made a mistake here, my worries about this guy are now manifesting themselves on the pitch, do you have any kind of duty to the player, especially when he's that young, to say, well, I'm just going to leave him out there even though it's bad for the team, or do you have to put the team first? But he knows all these things about him and he still put him on. You know, if he understood that the guy is like this, he doesn't train well, he's not reliable, then don't put him on. But once you do you have a duty of care to the individual?
No, because if you put a guy on and you're taking him off after 18 minutes, he better be absolutely stinking the place out. And I mean, he better be awful, beyond belief, insofar as it's one of those days where he just can't get himself together, or he's genuinely just like, his temperament or his demeanour is showing, I don't want to be here. Why did you bother putting me on? I want to go back to Italy. And I don't think he showed either of those things. I'm not by any stretch of imagination saying he played well. He didn't. He gave away a couple of free kicks. Maybe he looked like he didn't understand what he was told when he was going on. Because I actually went back and I watched the highlights. The last 20 minutes, because I was interested myself, and I just watched him. And Duncan Ferguson is shouting at him from the touchline the minute he got on the pitch. Okay. So that either tells me that Duncan Ferguson is either really, really upset with him, or he hasn't given him the instructions, or there's been a breakdown somewhere, because Moise Kean is clearly not giving Duncan Ferguson what he wants, or he's not doing what he's been told to do. No, you can say that's the player's fault or that's the manager's fault. If the manager gets his point across, then that's his fault. So if you put a player on and he's not crystal clear of what you want from him, because he wasn't that bad. He ran around, not amazingly so, but he ran around. Yeah, he gave away a couple of free kicks and whatnot, but he genuinely looked like he went on and he stood in the middle of the park. And at one point, he's screaming at him, and he runs past Calvert-Lewin, who's playing on the right, and it just looked very mixed up. And I think that's more of a reflection on the manager as well, if I'm being honest with you. But that's what happens when Duncan Ferguson isn't a manager. You know, he's not an experienced manager. So without looking, knowing what's going on behind the scenes, it's difficult to say. What it looked like for me is that he went on and he didn't know his job. Yeah.
Funny, the only manager it reminded me of as someone who might pull a similar stunt was Jose.
I've seen it done before. I've seen it done loads of times before. But generally when it happens, as a teammate, if the player deserved it, like he came on and he was absolutely terrible. He didn't try at all. He basically just tossed the game off and said, look, I don't really care anymore. Then you can justify it. But if you do that to a player and he's not been playing that bad, it sends out a funny message to the squad, and you're going to get caught sooner or later, and that's why he isn't experienced enough. He doesn't have the temperament. Yes, he's got passion and emotion, but he hasn't got logic, because managers need to manage on logic, not emotion.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think maybe what Jose might have done was say something to the player as he was bringing him off, whereas Ferguson sort of ignored him a little bit, which compounded the whole feel of the situation. And then he tried to kind of lie initially about why he'd taken him off. He said, oh no, it was nothing to do with Keane, it was just I needed to get somebody on. But then later on he admitted, well, okay, look, Keane didn't get to the pitch of the game. Like, I mean, it was obvious to everyone that you hadn't just randomly picked the guy to take off.
Well, Jose took off Eric Dyer in one of his first games.
The Champions League,
And everyone was kind of saying, oh, well, that's the end of Eric Dyer. But there was logic in what Jose did. You could see straight away as why he took him off. They were losing a game 2-0. He needed to get back in the game. He didn't need a defensive midfield player. And afterwards, he explained it. And everyone went, yeah, that seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Whereas Duncan Ferguson ignored him when he was coming off and then kind of got in a muddle saying, I needed to get some fresh legs on the pitch. Well, he's only been on 18 minutes. So, I mean, he's not tired out. So, you know, it just is that, listen, it's decisions like that as to why I don't think he obviously isn't going to get the job, you know.
Yeah. So you said you had a look back at the game again, even to see about Keane's performance. What about Manchester United then, who are fairly firmly entrenched of this beating the bigger sides versus slipping up against sides who don't really come out and play all that much? Like Seamus Coleman made the point afterwards. He was talking to Stephen Doyle here, who was on commentary, and he was saying, like, from Everton's point of view, they didn't see it as a day for fullbacks getting ahead of the ball. And if you develop that a bit further, the implication is, well, against Manchester United, if we sit back and keep things reasonably solid, they're not at a point where they can cut teams open yet. They can get itch on the break, obviously, but less so against lesser teams. They're coming unstuck in that department routinely now.
Yeah, they're lacking a real quality from midfield, a player that can pick a pass or a player that can do something special. I mean, they're a good side. They're diligent. They're workmanlike. A lot of young players feeling their way in, learning the game, learning how to win games like Everton yesterday, as opposed to playing in Europe where they may not necessarily have most of the possession. They can counter-attack. But that's up to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer to get the players in that he wants. But to be talking about Man United in this breath is crazy, really, when you look at the amount of money they have spent and you look at the squad that they're left with. Because it's not as if they tightened the purse strings after Alex Ferguson. I mean, they've spent upwards of 800 million, I think, since Ferguson has left, something in that ballpark. And to see some of the young players that are on there, I mean, the waste of money is just it's criminal, basically.
Is that a difficult thing to coach? You know, I'm not saying Everton parked the bus, but I'm just talking generally here. Because you often see frustrated managers saying, well, look, like there was no space, the opposition parked the bus, we couldn't make a breakthrough. It would strike me as just by physics, you know. It is the toughest thing to imbue a team with the ability to do. I'm sure with Palace you found yourself sitting in against really good teams and been able to withstand it. So, like, is that something you'd be looking at Solskjaer saying, well, you need to coach this team how to break down 10 men behind the ball? Is that possible to coach?
Oh, 100%. Well, question, you know, and there's lots of things that can feed into that, you know, switching the play. Because, you know, if they're, you know, sometimes a lot of teams will get all 11 players over in one half of the pitch. And when I talk about half the pitch, I'm thinking if you draw a line from the penalty spot to the penalty spot, when you're playing that compact, narrow, you know, your opposite fullback will be on the penalty spot. You're right. So you have all 11 players in one half of the pitch, that side of it. So the switch of play is what will get you quickly, because when the ball gets switched and when that team that's been defending on that side is getting across, you get like the concertina effect, you know, where one player will move more quickly than the other and little gaps will slightly appear. And then when it gets switched well, you come back in the middle. And when you come back in the middle, that's how you break it up. Whereas if you're slow and players are taking 2 or 3 touches, it's very easy to get into your shape. And you look to your left, you look to your right, you look in front, and you look behind you if you're a midfield player, and no one's going to be more than 10 yards away from you. So there's no gaps to get through. What kills you or what gets you through that is playing 1 and 2 touch and switching the play and continuously switching it. Not just switching it and staying on one side, switching it back again, because that's how you widen that, because that's how you want your gaps to appear. You need to widen those 2 banks of 4 so you can get through it. And Manchester United just move the ball too slowly. They seem intent on kind of, if they're attacking down one side, they seem to stay down that one side. Whereas you've got to switch it very, very quickly in 1, if not 2 passes maximum, and then switch it back again. And eventually one player will switch off and not kind of get across like you're supposed to, and that's when the good players will find that gap in your armoury.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Whereas with what Manchester United are doing, if you and your Crystal Palace team a couple of years ago were there, everyone's comfortable, you're all talking to each other, it's all in front of you. Yeah, there's never any big gaps, and you know that if you do get caught a little bit, you know there's someone only 10 yards away, so you'll get dug out. You know, and I think that's what, you know, the top teams, Manchester City, do. When they're caught, when teams sit in and digging against them, they just keep switching it. Even if there's a pass on, they won't play it until they're 100% sure the gap is there. They'll just keep switching it, and it's basically like a cat playing with a ball of wool. You know, they're just waiting. You know, they're having fun with you, and then all of a sudden somebody switches off, and then they go through you and they get you. So that's how you do that. That's how you coach when you play against those types of systems. That's the best way to beat it. But Man United. Just very slow, and they've young players as well, and they've not got players that are of the technical level of a David Silva or, you know,
Kevin De Bruyne, that can, hit a one-touch switch, 40 yards across the pitch to Benjamin Mendy, who then come back in field to David Silva.
Yes.
They have not those types of players. That's just not how they operate right now. But they're, Solskjaer's doing a reasonable job. I still don't think he's a man that's going to get Manchester United competitive again. I think Man United are going to be playing the UEFA Cup because Solskjaer doesn't seem to have that ruthless streak in him, to really. They don't look a well-coached team, United. They're okay, don't get me wrong. They have good players, but they're not. I've watched them several times. There's nothing about them where you pick out one trait that they have and go, oh my God, they're really good at that. There's just nothing amazing about them,
Yeah, or kind of sophisticated from a coaching point of view.
Yeah, I mean, you watch and there's no patterns develop when you watch them play. They've got good players and they go and play, and sometimes they win, sometimes they lose, sometimes they draw. And that's just where they are right now,
Yeah, that's probably the reality. One last brief tangent on that, because it's very interesting to get your perspective on playing against teams when you're sat in and you're set, and the teams you can break it down as opposed to the teams you can't. Because it is really striking, even when you're watching on TV. Say a Man City facing a team with 10 men behind the ball, and as you said, they're like a cat playing with a ball, or a half-dead mouse, or whatever metaphor you want to use. Even when they're not making inroads, even when they're not pulling players out, there's just this sense that they're in control of the dynamics. Yeah. They're in control. Whereas you watch Manchester United against a team sitting back, it never feels like United are in control of the dynamics.
Yeah. There's definitely, when you watch United, an element of panic. If they've got someone pinned in and they've had 15, 20 passes, the next fellow that gets the ball thinks, oh my God, we're not doing anything, we're not going anywhere, and they'll try something very, very difficult. One of the best traits of the top teams, Man City's, Chelsea's, is they have their principles, they have their beliefs, and if you're drawing 0-0, which I have been before against these big teams, they will not come away from their beliefs. They will just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. Their patterns, they'll keep going. 91st, 92nd minute, they don't panic, they don't force it, they don't try something they shouldn't try, because they believe in their system. And of course, teams will agree that, some days it doesn't work, but they won't come away from what they believe in, because they know over the course of a 38-game season, they'll win more often, or they'll win enough games to win leagues, as Jose used to do. So they don't panic. Whereas with United, it just looks a little bit off the cuff. And as I said before, when you get upward of 20 passes, there's no patience there. They won't come back out and keep going and waiting for the perfect gap, Someone will try and force something. And that's what you want when you're the defending team and you're sitting in with 10 players behind the ball. You want them to force a pass because, well, that favours the defensive team, really. Yeah,
OK, very interesting. We'll be talking to Gary Breen later on about Arsenal, so I won't double up on that right now. There is a text in, by the way, from Ollie in Dublin. I see it's scoreless at the moment. Why are you laughing?
I know where this is going on.
No, it's not a Stephen Cluxton text you'll be relieved to hear.
Okay.
We've saved that abuse for later on. We'll get you again on that. Brilliant. He says, I see it's scoreless between Brighton and Crystal Palace. Is it? Has it kicked off? Maybe that's why it's scoreless. Yeah. Oh, has it? Okay. He says, can you ask Damien if the A23 is actually a derby, or is that media hype? The A23 derby?
Yeah, so it's about an hour to Brighton from Croydon. Which is where Crystal Palace is. It's a rivalry. I didn't know. I didn't know about. Say again.
That's not a derby.
Listen, I agree with geographically it's not. But if you ask the Crystal Palace fans, they genuinely dislike the Brighton fans, and I'm pretty sure there'll have been trouble at the game tonight. There was a genuine dislike. It goes back to the 80s. Something to do with someone stole a manager. I've heard several different stories, but because it's geographically not, like when I signed for Crystal Palace, Charlton, Millwall, West Ham, but Millwall are kind of preoccupied with West Ham, whereas kind of the geographically closest team would be Millwall. But I think Millwall haven't got much interest in Palace really because they're preoccupied with West Ham. So Charlton will kind of be the next one in. But for some reason, Brighton, the Crystal Palace fans have a genuine dislike of Brighton. And Brighton don't like Palace fans too much either. But it's the biggest game of the season for them. You ask any Crystal Palace fan, they will say it's the biggest game of the season for them.
Really? I'm trying to jog my memory here. I have a feeling we may have done a piece on this before. Was there a thing in Wembley recently, or in one of the dressing rooms, where someone took a dump?
Yeah, that was Ian Holloway in the playoff semi-final.
Well, I'm not saying it was him that took a dump.
No. When we got to the Amex for the return leg, we drew 0-0 at Selhurst, and we got there. And when we got in the changing room, there was someone took a big dump in the middle of the kind of shower area. And when we went in, Ian Holloway just hit the roof and just was trying to fight some Brighton staff members. And sure, we were as players. I mean, that was Ollie. He was like that. He was eccentric. So we got cleaned up. It wasn't, didn't bother us. But Ollie made a big deal of it because he just wanted to, that's what he's like. You know what I mean? He wanted to cause a scene and everything. But we ended up winning that game anyway. So. Yeah. There's some funny stories about how that turd actually came to be in our change.
I'm sure there are, because Gus Poyet was the manager at the time, wasn't he? The opposition manager. Oh yeah, okay, I've got it here. This is all coming back to me now. So Gus Poyet sent an angry email to all the employees, and it leaked into the Sun because obviously if you're sending an email, what do you expect? He said, for some. Imagine having to write this email. For some reason that is still not clear to me, someone during the day had access to the away dressing room and done something terrible.
Yeah.
He says, and then he goes on to say it in clear English, someone had a poo all outside the toilets, over and around the toilets. I am angry that someone within this club would endanger our good name and stoop so low. Did they imagine it would affect the Crystal Palace players? Well, possibly it did. It fired them up. Somebody made a very bad decision.
Yeah, well, you know what? The word on the street, or what we were told afterwards, is it was our bus driver did it. That was we had a bus driver was called Jock at the time, and obviously the kit man goes out in the afternoon to set out all the jerseys and whatnot, and apparently he wasn't feeling very well, and while he was sitting on the toilet trying to do his business, he had the urge to vomit. And apparently he jumped off the toilet and vomited in the sink while continuing to soil himself. But then, out of panic, didn't tell anyone and apparently left the changing room. So when we got there was vomit and stuff. But Ollie hit the roof. He went into the tunnel at 7 o'clock and was trying to fight all the Brighton staff about the disrespect and everything. But we kind of had headphones on. Someone came in and cleaned it up, really, and that was that, really, if I'm being honest. Yeah, and we went on to win the game. So that's kind of the story behind it.
Right.
That night, but the other stuff, I'm not sure, man. I mean, I know.
I think there was a leg break back in the day from memory, and it all kicked off as well, and things got a bit nasty. Yeah. I'm going to say, by the way, for legal reasons, this story about Jock may not be true. This is subject to confirmation.
Oh, 100%. It may not be true, but that's what we were told.
That's what you were told. Okay.
That was the word on the campfire.
Well, what a moment to finish on, and the image that you've painted there is really
brilliant.
Yeah. Ideal, perfect. Listen, thanks a mil, appreciate it.
Brilliant.
All right, Damien Delaney there. We'll take a short break.